So the first thing that I wanted to talk about in this series is the idea of transferring textures on your model when the UVs change. So let's say that you've already created a model, and I'll be demonstrating with a character model here, but it doesn't have to be a character. It could be a model of anything really. But then you need to change the UVs. There are a few reasons why you might want to change the UVs. Let's say that maybe you need to add another part to your texture, but you don't have room. So what you have to do is you have to rearrange the UVs, and then hopefully save time by transferring whatever texture work you have already done to this new model. Conversely, what might happen is maybe you want to remove some stuff from your texture sheet in order to reallocate the UV space and just get more textile density on the pieces that are going to be there. So I'm going to be demonstrating using Maya and XNormal to do this. There are probably a few other programs out there that can do the same thing, but hopefully, if nothing else, this will kind of give you an idea of what the process is so that you can research how to do it in whatever application you favor. So here you can see I have a character model. This is a model I did over 4 years ago now. There are a few things that I would do differently these days, but I still like to feature some of my old work in these videos just for the sake of giving them some screen time that they wouldn't get otherwise. So this is Sydney Savage. She was a comic book character made by J. Scott Campbell in the Danger Girl series. And I did this for a contest, but anyway, as an example, what I have here is this is her posed, and these are some things I made for her. She has a whip and a gun here. Interesting enough, the gun actually was never used in the final presentation, just because I couldn't figure out a way to put it into the presentation in any way that really made sense. So I felt like I kind of wasted some time there, but anyway, that's how it goes. So let's say you wanted to go from something like this here, where this is the model in the T-pose with the whip and the gun. And then you wanted to, let's say, remove these things because you didn't need it. You just wanted a character by itself on the UV space. So if I take a look at the UVs for a second here, if I look at the UVs for this character here, you can see what we have here, the layout that we have. She actually had teeth as well, but since she never really opened her mouth in presentation, I kind of got rid of the model there. But let's say you wanted to redo the UVs so that the gun and the whip are gone, and then you have something like this. So you can see some of these UV shells have been rotated and moved around, or maybe even scaled a little bit, just to make better use of the 0 to 1 UV space. So what I did was I made a duplicate of this model. I got rid of these pieces here, so I was left with just the UVs of these meshes right here. And then what I did was I moved the UVs around to match this layout here. And this was really just a quick UV layout that all I did was just try to make it different from this one, just for the sake of demonstration. It's not really, if you really look at it, it's really not that much more optimized than the original. But hopefully you would spend a lot more time on your own model and actually make it more optimized if this is what you were trying to do. And then what I did was I transferred the textures that I had already done for this model here onto this. And this video is going to show my process for doing that. So before we actually transfer the textures, I want to give you a look at how the scene is set up. And I'll open up the outliner, which is one of the most important windows that I use within Maya. We can ignore the first group here. That's just like the pose model and the text up here. What we're going to be focusing on is the source group and the target group. The source group are all of the meshes that make up this original source model. And the target group is all of the meshes that make up the model with the new UVs. And basically the only difference here is that besides the UVs changes is that the target group does not have the gun and the whip anymore. And you can see that I've tried to be as organized as possible with this. Each respective piece is named the same except with a different prefix. I have source prefixed for all of these meshes and target prefixed for all of these meshes. And that's not a requirement by any means, but it being organized would definitely make your life easier, just to not get confused and maybe transfer textures on the wrong objects. And if I open up my Hypershade here, you can see that I'm trying to keep this as organized as possible too. What we're going to be mostly concerned about is the source material and the transfer material. The source material is the material that I originally had to make up this object, this model here, and also this pose model. It's basically the same thing, except this one's posed. And the reason why you want to have a different material for your target is just so that for display purposes you're going to need it. It's going to be a different UV layout and it's going to be needing different textures to show up. So that's what this is for. Transfer material. It's for this object here. So now that we have our scene set up, let's go ahead and start transferring the textures. And we're going to be using the transfer maps window. You can find that underneath the rendering tab and under lighting and shading transfer maps. What you're going to want to do here, let me just bring this back to default here. So this is kind of what you would see when you first open up the window for the first time. And I do go over a lot more of the specifics of this window in my baking maps video that you can find on my YouTube channel. But let's just quickly go through this for this model. I'm going to select the meshes that I want to transfer from. These are the source meshes. And I'll go ahead and add selected under the appropriate tab, source meshes. And for target, I'll select all these meshes and I'll add them here. And you can see why it was important to name your objects appropriately, just to keep things straight here. What you could do is you could do one at a time. For example, you could do the hair, add that to the source, and then add this hair, add it to selected, and just bake it one at a time. If for whatever reason that was what you needed to do. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and do everything at one time, just because I can. It would save me some time. Now for the search envelope here, if I change the display here to both, you can see when I move up the slider, you can see how far Maya is going to sample from in order to try to pick up the texture from this model. And because these models are essentially the same, the only thing that's different between them are the UVs. So you don't have to worry about the search envelope too much in this case. If the model did change, then you might have to, but for our purposes here, just keeping it at 0 was fine, and letting Maya do the rest. Depending on the difference between the models and the scale of your model in the scene, you may need to play with this. Scrolling down here, for output maps, what you want to do is you want to be doing a diffuse map. So in our case here, I'm just going to change this to Targa. Basically, I just pick a file format that I know will not have any lossy compression, such as a Targa. That's perfectly fine. And in this case, I'm just going to render a new file. I'm just going to call this render test. Okay. And personally, in the next section, connect output maps, I usually leave this off. If you left it on, what it would do is it would make a new shader for you and automatically assign this texture to it, which could be, convenient depending on what you want to do. But I feel like I could do that myself pretty easily, and I don't like Maya creating extra stuff for me, so that's why I leave it off. Just my personal way of doing things. And the only other thing we need to worry about now is under Maya Common Output, you want to change your texture size to the size that you want. In my case, the texture was a 2K map, so I have 2048 by 2048 here. And in this case, I'm also transferring in object space, and that is because my objects are not on top of each other. What I did was I duplicated this group, the source group, and then I moved it over. You can see there's in the transformations here, there's this group was moved over 122.535 units in X to the right here. So basically, if you leave object space on, then it will take into account that this object has been moved, and it will kind of treat it as if it was not moved. It will treat it as if it was still back here, and that's what object space means. If you left it on world space, then your map would not bake correctly in this situation, because world space it is expecting these models to be basically on top of each other. It's expecting for this group to never have been moved at all. And world space is something that I would normally use, because normally I wouldn't need to be offsetting my target group. I just offset it for the sake of demonstration, just to make it clear that these meshes over here are the source, and these meshes over here are the target. So I'll leave this in object space for now. And sampling quality, for me, I left it on high. Before committing to a high, what you might want to do is you might want to lower the resolution and also the sampling quality, just to do a test render and make sure that things are working the way you expect before you spend a lot of time letting Maya render out this huge, perfect texture. Because this can take a few minutes depending on your machine's power and what quality you want. And that's pretty much it for me. Another thing that you might need to play with is ignore mirrored faces here. In my case, I did not have to, because if I look at my UVs, what I've done is I've offset all of the pieces that are mirrored. You should take a look at this mode. Also, all the red pieces have been offset one whole unit to the right. But if I did not do this, if I just laid it out as I would at first, and then duplicated or mirrored those meshes over, you'd have something that looks kind of like this. You know, with it overlapping. And this is fine in Maya, except that if you did leave it like this, then you would have to make sure that you have this checked. The reason, and you know, this is way more convenient, of course, but the reason why I don't do this, and the reason why I have it offset, is that most other programs do not like having overlapping UVs like that. So if I were going to use this same model to bake another kind of map in another kind of program, it would most likely complain, and it would want me to do this anyway. So, you know, that's just kind of why I just get it out of the way as soon as I can. So once you have that set up, just to give you some background on what this window is going to do, it's going to take a look at this object. It's going to look at the materials that are on this object and the textures. And in this case, what you're going to want to do, this is the source material here. You can see I have a color map hooked up, and I have the normal map hooked up. And I also increased the ambient color here, just so it looks nicer in the viewport. But for the sake of demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down the ambient color. You can see, it doesn't quite look as nice anymore, but this will bake more accurately, because when you're transferring the diffuse in Maya, Maya will take these things into account, like these other sliders. So you don't want to have it lightening your texture because you've increased the ambient color, or something like that. So just make sure you don't have any other effects turned on in your material here. And then that's about it. All I have to do is hit bake, and so this will take a few minutes. So here we are back again with, I've already gone ahead and applied that texture that we just rendered onto this model. And you can see right away that there's a problem here. We can see there's a line showing up in the middle of the model, and also anywhere else where there were texture seams. And the reason this is happening is because if you look at the texture for a second here, there's some inaccuracies in the display, where at the edge of the UV borders, where it meets black here, that's where these lines are coming from. When you zoom in, it's not apparent, but when you zoom out, this is kind of what happens, and this will happen in game as well, even more blatantly so in game, because what will happen is that usually what happens is textures, you set it up so that from far away the textures mip down, or basically they get downsized, and these kinds of issues become even more apparent if you have the edges of your UV borders very close to the borders of the texture like this. There are a few ways to get around it. If you open the transfer maps window again, if you go back down to Maya Common Output here, fill texture seams is a number that you can increase, basically edge padding. So if you increase this by, like, let's say 10, what it will do is it'll take the colors that are on the edges, and it will sample it out 10 pixels, and that usually fixes this, so even when you zoom out and the texture is downsized in game, there will still be enough pixel data on the edges to account for that. In my case, I actually leave it at 0 in Maya or whatever program I'm baking with. Usually I don't deal with edge padding, and what I would do instead is in Photoshop here is I will go ahead and add that myself, usually after the fact, as kind of like a last step before submitting into the game engine. Now to do this, you're going to need a mask, and sometimes what you can do is you can just magic wand select the black areas, and it'll kind of get everything, as long as you keep off anti-alias. The problem in this case right here, you can see that it is kind of picking up information inside of the UV shells, and that's just because there's some 000 black pixels in the texture itself. So that's going to be a problem. So what I did was I created this mask here, and the way I did that was back in Maya for the source object, all I did was I just gave it a new texture or a new material with just flat white as its color, and then I transferred that. The nice thing about doing something like rendering out these masks is that the quality doesn't really matter here. So under Maya Common Output, you could just leave it on preview quality, and this will render very, very quickly, just a few seconds. And then you get something like this that you can use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to quickly there, and then you can see I have this all masked out, and I'm going to apply that layer mask, and let's see, I'm just going to make a new background, new black background. So you can see I have this all on its own layer, and then I'm going to use XNormal's dilation filter. XNormal, if you don't know, it's we're going to get into it in a little bit here. It's a free program used to bake a variety of different maps, including color maps, like the one we just baked in Maya. But when you install that, usually it'll install some Photoshop filters for you too, and what I'm going to use is the dilation filter. And it'll take a few seconds to pop up. Unfortunately, in newer versions of Photoshop, this seems to be slower. But anyway, so you can pick how much you want the edge padding to be. In my case, usually I just pick a pretty high number, like 32, and this will work in almost every situation. There isn't any problem with going with having too high of edge padding, so you don't need to really worry about the edges bleeding into each other. And this is kind of why I like to do things as a last step. So yeah, go ahead and go do it and wait for a few seconds for this to work. Okay, so hopefully it's clear what this is all about now. If I toggle it back and forth, this is before and this is after. So again, it's just taking the pixel data that's going around the UV border edges and just kind of duplicating it out. In this case, 32 pixels out. So if I were to save this, let me go ahead and save over the render test target that we were using before. And 24 bits is fine. I'm not going to save an alpha channel with this, so 24 bits is fine. And if I go back here and go ahead and reload everything, you can see, there we go. The line is gone. So once you've transferred the color map or the diffuse map, you can go ahead and do the same thing with the other textures that you use on the model. For example, if you had a specular map or gloss map or roughness map or whatever kind of RGB map that you needed to transfer, you could do that using the same method, where instead of putting the color map in the colors channel here on the material, you just save out whatever texture it is and to hook it up into here in the color map here, and transfer it the same way using the diffuse color map transferring. Now this will work in just about every situation except for the normal map. I'm going to be talking about how to transfer normal maps when UVs are rotated in a future video. But for now, just this is something that you can use for most other situations, including the normal map if you did not rotate the UVs. So I just showed the texture transferring process in Maya, and now I wanted to show how you might approach it in using a program like XNormal. Again, XNormal is a free application that you can download at xnormal.net, and it lets you bake a lot of different kinds of maps here. Normal maps, height maps, and all these. There's a long list of maps here that you can bake with it. For our purposes right now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be baking bake base texture, and this is what it's going to do is it's going to sample the textures on one model so that we can transfer it onto another one. For the source mesh, we'll be putting it into the high definition meshes here, even though it's not really a high resolution model or anything like that. So you can see here I have my source meshes loaded. I've exported all of them, each one as an OBJ file, and I've done that. Each of them is a separate OBJ right here, and I've loaded them separately. And this is, you don't have to do this. You could combine all those pieces into one if you really wanted to. I just kept them separate for the sake of, what if one piece was giving you more trouble than another? It'd be nice to be able to isolate that piece and troubleshoot that in isolation from the other ones. So I've loaded the source OBJ here, and under low definition meshes, I've loaded in the target meshes, which I've done the same thing. I've exported each of the meshes as its own OBJ file. And what I've done in the high definition meshes, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you load in a base texture to bake. And this is just, you can access that through here by right-clicking in this field and just add base texture to bake and browse to your source diffuse map that you want to transfer from. And for where you're going to transfer to, you just go to baking options and the output file. And in this case, I've already set up a path for rendering. In the file is going to be called render.xnormal.targa. And that's pretty much it. You might have to play around with the max frontal ray distance and maximum rear distance, these values here, in order to find a result that bakes well for you. Unfortunately, XNormal is a lot more finicky about these numbers than Maya. If you remember, in Maya, I just set everything to 0, and it worked perfectly fine. But that's probably not going to be the case in XNormal. What you might even have to find yourself having to do is you actually might have to use a cage or something just to make sure that things are baking the way you would expect them to. And this is the reason why I don't use XNormal for this myself. I normally just use Maya because it's just less fuss, really. And so once you have all that set up, you just make sure you have bake base texture checked here and nothing else checked. The options here, you don't really need to worry about too much here, unless you have a specific need for changing the color or something like that. And the rest of the options here are pretty similar to in Maya. You have the size of the texture here, edge padding, which again, I'm not going to have any edge padding. I'm going to do that myself. And the other options here, a lot of stuff about XNormal I've described in my texture, in my baking maps video, so I won't go into too much detail here. But aside from that, the only other option you have is anti-aliasing. But that's going to be up to you to decide how much you need. Really, it's not a big deal if you leave it at 4x, because when you hit generate maps here, you can see that XNormal, it does this very quickly, actually, compared to Maya. Transferring a 2K map at the highest quality level in Maya took probably like 5 minutes for me. Whereas you can see here, this is, 30 seconds or so. And if you take a look at the result here, it looks pretty good. There are a few areas where there's some problems. You can see in the lips here, it's having some trouble, and also in the hair here, it's having some trouble. Now these aren't really that big of a deal as far as being problems. Like, these are actually, you can easily paint these out if you just really wanted a quick and dirty way of fixing it. But just for reference, you can check out, this is the image from Maya. What is what Maya baked? You can see there aren't any artifacts in these areas like there are on the XNormal bake. So, just wanted to present another option out there for those of you who may not use Maya. You can always use XNormal. One caveat to transferring your textures this way is that it's not always going to be a perfect result. If all you're doing is you're moving the UVs, or maybe you're flipping them or rotating them at 90-degree angles, then the result should be pretty much 1-to-1. But once you add arbitrary rotation to the mix, like let's say you rotated a UV shell 45 degrees, the pixels, pixels are in the shape of a square, right? And if you rotate that, it's going to have to reinterpret a diamond shape essentially into a square again. So, there's always going to be some loss of quality when that happens. The important thing is just to keep the big picture in mind. The time that you're going to save doing something like this is probably worth compromising a little bit of quality. Your texture will be a little bit blurrier, so you might have to sharpen it up a little bit yourself, but it's usually not that big of a deal. Just to wrap things up, I wanted to say a few things about transferring textures like this, and it's that it's not the ideal solution. Obviously, if you could get it right the first time, then that's what you should strive for. The reason why this becomes necessary is just, if you spend a lot of time already texturing your model, and time's of the essence, and you need to move on, but your client, whether it be the company you work for or whoever, they need you to do this kind of change, and they are okay with the fact that, hey, you know what, if I do it this way, what you're going to get is basically a flattened texture. Like, you're not going to have all of your layers from your PSD. You could go layer by layer and transfer it and try to rebuild the PSD manually, but in production environment, that's not always a practical way of looking at it. So, as long as everyone's okay with that, then this is a very handy solution to work around. And sometimes, it's just going to be a necessary thing. And the one reason why I wanted to make this video is to point out that, hey, even if you do make a mistake, or someone does ask you to change something drastically about your UV layout, such as in this example, then there's always a solution out there to take care of it. So you shouldn't ever feel like, oh, hey, I'm losing all this work. I've got to go back and redo everything, because that's not always true. Well, that wraps it up for this video on transferring textures when the UVs change on a model. And I hope you've learned something from it. If you did enjoy it, please do like the video, and feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember that I do have other videos available on my YouTube channel, and some of them are for pay as well, if you are looking to get more in-depth information specifically on how to create a character model for games.